In the flickering candlelight of forgotten cathedrals, whispers still echo of a brotherhood that once shook the very foundations of Christendom, the Knights Templar, warriors of God, protectors of pilgrims, guardians of unimaginable treasures. But what if the story we have been told is only half the truth? What if the Templars carried with them not only swords and shields, but also secrets, secrets so powerful that kings feared them, and the Church itself sought to bury them forever? The story of the Knights Templar does not begin with their downfall, nor with their burning at the stake, but with a world drenched in both blood and faith. To understand their rise, we must step back into the 11th century, a time when Europe was raw, restless, and waiting for a cause that would ignite it. It was an age when faith was not a private matter, but the pulse of life itself. Churches towered over towns, relics drew pilgrims across dangerous landscapes, and salvation was preached as the ultimate treasure. And yet, beneath the hymns and holy processions, fear haunted the hearts of believers, fear of damnation, fear of heresy, fear of losing Jerusalem, the sacred city where Christ had walked. In the year 1095, Pope Urban II lit the flame. At Clermont, his voice thundered to the gathered crowds, Deus vult, God wills it! He called upon knights and peasants alike to take up the cross, march eastward, and reclaim Jerusalem from the so-called infidels. What followed was chaos wrapped in holiness, the First Crusade, a brutal collision of faith and ambition. By 1099, Jerusalem had fallen to the Crusaders. Blood flowed through its streets, staining even the stones of the Holy Sepulchre. Yet victory was only the beginning of peril. For Christian pilgrims who wished to walk in the footsteps of Christ, the roads remained treacherous. Bandits, raiders, and enemy warlords struck mercilessly. To journey to the Holy Land was to risk death at every step. It was here, in this shadowed landscape, that a small brotherhood emerged, 9 knights, led by a man named Hugues de Payens. They were poor, they were few, but their vow was ironclad. They pledged to protect pilgrims travelling the perilous roads to Jerusalem. They called themselves the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. To us, they are known simply as the Knights Templar. Their headquarters was no ordinary place. King Baldwin II of Jerusalem granted them quarters on the Temple Mount itself, the most sacred ground of ancient Israel. Beneath that mount lay ruins, whispers of Solomon's Temple, a site said to hold unimaginable relics of the past. Already, the Templars were shrouded in an aura of mystery. See, were they truly protecting pilgrims, or searching for something buried deep beneath the stones? From the very beginning, legends twined themselves around the order. Chroniclers spoke of tunnels dug beneath the Temple Mount, of secret excavations, of treasures unearthed and spirited away in silence. Some whispered of the Ark of the Covenant, hidden since the days of Babylon. Others murmured of documents, scrolls that could shake the very foundations of the Church. But while rumours spread in hushed tones, the public face of the Templars was one of piety and humility. They took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. They wore plain white mantles marked only by a red cross, symbols of sacrifice and blood. Their rules forbade luxury, no rich foods, no silk clothing, no soft pillows. Yet despite this simplicity, they quickly became renowned as warriors unlike any other. For in battle, the Templars fought with a ferocity that bordered on the supernatural. Chroniclers marvelled at their discipline. They charged in silence. They never retreated. They seemed to embody the wrath of heaven itself. To face a Templar charge was, many believed, to face the judgment of God, and soon their fame spread beyond the Holy Land. Pilgrims who survived their journeys praised them. Kings and nobles, inspired by their holy mission, began to donate land, wealth, and privilege. The Templars, those poor soldiers, suddenly found themselves guardians of vast estates across Europe. Within a single generation, See, the order grew from 9 knights to thousands. Their fortresses dotted the roads of the Holy Land. Their farms and estates flourished in France, England, and Spain. They became bankers, lending money to kings, storing treasures, safeguarding pilgrim wealth. The church blessed them, exempted them from taxes, allowed them to cross borders freely. And so the Templars rose to a power both holy and worldly. They were monks, but they were also warriors. They were poor in name, but richer than any other order in Christendom. They knelt before the cross, but kings themselves knelt before them, see, begging loans to fund wars. Yet from the beginning a question lingered like a shadow at the edge of their story. What had they truly found beneath the Temple of Solomon? What secret lay at the root of their sudden rise, their unstoppable expansion? Some say it was knowledge, not gold, an ancient wisdom hidden for centuries, revealed only to those brave enough to uncover it. A wisdom that would one day prove more dangerous than any weapon, for though the Templars appeared loyal servants of the Church, their true allegiance may have been to something far older and far more forbidden. That suspicion would one day destroy them. But in these early years, the Templars were untouchable. They marched beneath the blazing sun of Palestine, their white cloaks gleaming like banners of purity. They defended pilgrims, fought in battles, and built a legend that spread across continents. And yet behind the shining image, the secret still lingered. Something had been discovered in Jerusalem, something they carried with them quietly, secretly, into the heart of Europe. The Templars were no longer merely protectors of pilgrims. They had become keepers of a mystery. And that mystery, like a slow-burning fuse, would one day ignite a fire that even kings and popes could not contain, because the truth they carried was too powerful to remain hidden forever. And the Church, whether in ignorance or fear, would one day try to erase it from the earth. The early Templars may have called themselves poor soldiers of Christ, but poverty was not to be their destiny. For in the crucible of the Crusades they discovered not only the art of holy war, but also the art of influence, wealth, and power. At first their role seemed simple: protect pilgrims, defend holy sites, and fight when called upon. But something remarkable began to happen. Pilgrims travelling to Jerusalem did not only fear the swords of bandits, they also feared losing the wealth they carried. Coins, jewels, and heirlooms were easy prey for thieves, and so the Templars devised a solution that would forever alter the flow of money in medieval Europe. A pilgrim could deposit their valuables with a Templar preceptory in their homeland. In return, he received a coded letter, a kind of early check. When he arrived in the Holy Land, he could present this note and receive funds of equal value from the Templar treasury there. It was, in effect, the birth of modern banking. Through this system, the Templars became the trusted financiers of Christendom. Kings entrusted them with war chests. Nobles left them lands in their wills. Merchants stored their fortunes in Templar strongholds, knowing that the Red Cross shielded them better than any army. Soon the Templars were not merely knights. They were bankers, accountants, and treasurers of an entire world. And with wealth came power. Templar lands stretched from the plains of France to the deserts of Syria. Their estates produced crops, wool, and wine. Their fortresses controlled trade routes. Their coffers grew so vast that even monarchs, men who styled themselves chosen by God, came to the Templars, hat in hand, asking for loans. It was said that the order owned more ships than most kingdoms, that their vaults rivaled royal treasuries, that no crown could be secured without their support. But wealth alone did not explain their rise. The Templars were also cloaked in divine privilege. From the very beginning, they had cultivated a special relationship with the Church. In 1129, at the Council of Troyes, their order was officially approved with the blessing of Bernard of Clairvaux. one of the most powerful churchmen of the age. Bernard called them new knights of Christ, warriors of purity, living saints who fought not for greed but for God himself. With such an endorsement, the Templars were untouchable. Soon, Pope Innocent II granted them privileges that even kings envied. They were exempt from paying taxes. They owed obedience only to the Pope, not to local bishops or rulers. They could cross borders without interference, operate courts of justice on their own lands, and collect their own tithes. In essence, they were a nation within nations, an international order bound not by the laws of kings, but by their own secret rule. And it was in this secrecy that suspicion began to take root. For ordinary people, the Templars seemed like holy warriors, but also different. Their white mantles and red crosses set them apart. Their closed rituals, conducted behind fortress walls, stirred unease. Their refusal to answer to anyone but the Pope made them seem aloof, almost untouchable. Rumours began to spread in hushed voices across Europe. What happened inside Templar initiation ceremonies? Why did novices whisper oaths that no outsider was allowed to hear? Why did they guard their knowledge so fiercely? Some said the knights spat on the cross as part of their rituals, though whether this was a symbol of humility or a darker act, no one could say. Others claimed they worshipped a mysterious idol, a bearded head called Baphomet. Still more whispered that they practiced forbidden magic drawn from what they had uncovered beneath the Temple Mount. The Church ignored these murmurs at first, for the Templars were too useful. They defended the Holy Land with unmatched discipline. They kept Europe's wealth safe. They embodied the militant spirit of the Crusades. And yet power breeds envy. Kings who borrowed from the Templars began to resent their creditors. Lords who saw their lands swallowed by the order began to fear their reach. And priests who watched their privileges eclipsed by these warrior monks began to whisper that perhaps holiness and wealth made for a dangerous union. The Templars themselves seemed unconcerned. They built fortresses on distant frontiers, great castles like cracked desk chevaliers, impregnable against siege. They rode into battle with banners flying, chanting psalms as they charged. They perfected the art of shock warfare, their cavalry smashing enemy lines like a divine hammer. But behind their victories, another question lingered. Why had this small brotherhood, born in poverty, been chosen by fortune? Was it truly their discipline, their piety, their genius for organization, or was it something else, something drawn from the hidden vaults of Jerusalem, where their order had first taken root? Some chroniclers hinted that the Templar sudden wealth was not the result of donations alone. There were whispers of a hidden treasure unearthed from beneath the Temple Mount, carried across seas to secret preceptories in France. Gold relics or knowledge too dangerous for the Church to acknowledge. The truth was buried, and the Templars guarded it with their lives. For now, however, their star only rose higher. By the middle of the 12th century, they were the most feared warriors in the Holy Land and the most trusted bankers in Europe. Their symbols adorned churches and castles. Their name inspired awe and dread. But the higher they rose, the sharper grew the knives waiting in the shadows. For in the courts of kings and in the corridors of the Vatican, men were already asking dangerous questions. Could any order be allowed to grow this powerful? Could warriors who answered to no crown, no bishop, no law but their own be tolerated forever? And if the whispers of heresy were true, what blasphemy might they be hiding? The Templars believed they were untouchable, but as history would soon prove, even the most powerful order can be brought to ruin, especially when the secret it guards is too dangerous to let survive. Because the Templars' true enemy was not the Saracens on the battlefield, it was the Church itself. And one day, that enemy would turn its full fury against them. The Templars stood at the height of their power, warriors of God, guardians of fortune, untouchable, servants of the Pope. But beneath the white mantles, marked with red crosses, something else stirred, something the world would never see directly, yet would haunt their legacy for centuries. For unlike other knights, the Templars lived by rules hidden from the eyes of ordinary men. Their vows were spoken in private, their initiations conducted behind closed doors. To enter the order was to pass through a veil of secrecy and to bind oneself to oaths that could never be broken. What happened in those rituals? The truth was known only to the brothers themselves, and they carried it with them to their graves. But outsiders, curious, suspicious, and envious, began to weave their own stories, and in the silence of secrecy, rumour finds fertile ground. Some said the Templars forced initiates to spit upon the cross, to deny Christ, to mock the very faith they claimed to defend. Others whispered that new members kissed one another on the mouth, the navel, or even stranger places, signs, they said, of a hidden perverse brotherhood. And then there were the darker tales, that in their secret chambers the Templars bowed before a head, an idol known as Baphomet, a bearded, mysterious face, sometimes described as demonic, sometimes said to be the preserved relic of a saint, and still others claiming it was the head of John the Baptist himself. What was this head? Was it merely slander, born of envy and fear, or was it something more, some relic or symbol too dangerous for the Church to acknowledge? No one outside the order could say, and the Templars themselves remained silent. Their silence was their strength, but also their greatest weakness, because secrecy breeds suspicion, and suspicion, once unleashed, it can become more dangerous than any sword. But why would such rumours arise in the first place? Part of the answer lies in the unique nature of the Templars' vows. Unlike other monks who lived in monasteries and prayed in cloisters, the Templars were warriors. They shed blood while wearing the mantle of holiness. They fought in battles, lived in fortresses, mingled with kings, and yet they still claimed to be monks of God. To many, this seemed unnatural. How could men who killed in war be holy? How could those who carried both sword and cross serve two masters without contradiction? This unease became fertile soil for darker suspicions. The Templars, some believed, must have turned to forbidden rites to reconcile their contradictions. Perhaps they had uncovered truths too dangerous for the Church, truths that required secrecy, oaths, and rituals that appeared heretical to outsiders. Indeed, whispers grew that the Templars had uncovered ancient wisdom in Jerusalem, scrolls from Solomon's temple, secrets of the Ark of the Covenant, or gospels long suppressed by the Church. And with such knowledge, perhaps they no longer bowed to the same Christ preached in Rome, the truth. We may never know, but the rumours spread in taverns. Peasants muttered that the Templars were sorcerers. In courts, nobles suggested they practiced black magic. In monasteries, monks warned that the warrior order had strayed into pride, wealth, and corruption. And yet the Templars seemed untouchable. They rode into battle with crosses gleaming. They lent kings their gold. They received blessings from the Pope himself. Surely, people thought these whispers must be lies, but others were not so sure. One accusation became especially dangerous, the claim that the Templars denied Christ during their secret rites. This rumour cut to the very heart of faith. To deny Christ was heresy of the blackest kind, punishable by death. And though there was little evidence, the secrecy of the order meant no one could easily disprove it. Why did the Templars not defend themselves more openly? Perhaps they trusted their reputation, believing their service spoke louder than rumour. Perhaps they truly had nothing to hide. Or perhaps, as some believe, they really did guard a secret, a truth so explosive that silence was their only protection. Whatever the reason, their silence would one day be used against them. For now the order continued to grow. Their castles rose higher, their coffers grew fuller, their influence spread wider. But so too did the shadows of suspicion. Chroniclers wrote of the strange oaths of obedience, the absolute secrecy of their brotherhood, the mysterious rituals whispered by their enemies, and while the church turned a blind eye, blinded, perhaps by its reliance on Templar wealth and swords, the seeds of doubt were already planted. And when the day came that kings and popes sought reasons to destroy the Templars, those seeds would bloom into deadly accusations. The irony is cruel. The very secrecy that had protected their order in its earliest days, secrecy that shielded them from enemies, secrecy that bound them together as brothers, would later be twisted into the very weapon used to annihilate them. But for now, the Templars stood unbroken. Their secrets remained locked within fortress walls. Their rituals continued in shadows. Their whispers of heresy lingered like distant thunder, ominous but not yet unleashed. And yet in that silence one can almost hear the storm gathering, for the day would come when their enemies would no longer whisper. They would shout, they would accuse, and they would condemn. And in the fires of that condemnation, the Templars' greatest secret would either be destroyed or hidden forever, because sometimes the deadliest weapon is not the sword, nor the cross. It is suspicion, and suspicion was already tightening its grip on the Knights Templar. For nearly 2 centuries, the Knights Templar had stood as untouchable pillars of Christendom. They had fought, they had prayed, they had guarded treasures both earthly and, perhaps, divine. But no order, no matter how powerful, is ever beyond envy. And envy, when sharpened by desperation, becomes a blade more deadly than any Saracen sword. See, the man who would wield that blade was Philip Ivy of France, known to history as Philip the Fair. His nickname did not reflect fairness of heart, but the pale beauty of his face, a beauty that masked a will of iron and a hunger without end. By the early 14th century, Philip's kingdom was drowning in debt. Wars had drained his coffers. His court demanded wealth, and much of that wealth had flowed into the vaults of the Templars, who had lent generously to the crown. But debts have a way of twisting admiration into resentment, and Philip, proud and ruthless, could not bear to be in the shadow of a brotherhood of monks who dared to act as bankers to kings. To make matters worse, the Crusades were failing, the Holy Land had been lost, Jerusalem recaptured by Muslim forces, and Christian armies driven back to the sea. The great mission of the Templars, their holy reason for existence, was collapsing. Their castles in Palestine stood abandoned, their armies dwindled. Their very purpose was fading, and to their enemies this fading purpose was an opportunity. Philip began to whisper in the ears of his advisers the Templars were too rich, too secretive, too dangerous. He accused them of corruption, of arrogance, of practicing strange rites. Whispers of heresy, long dormant, were revived. The charges multiplied, spitting on the cross, denying Christ, worshipping idols, indulging in blasphemies unfit to name. It was a masterstroke. By attacking their faith, Philip could cloak his greed in piety. He was not seizing their wealth. He could claim he was saving Christendom from heretics. But Philip knew he could not destroy the Templars alone. Their shield was not only wealth and fortresses, but the blessing of the Pope. If the Church protected them, even kings could not touch them. So Philip set his sights on the papacy itself. The Pope at this time was Clement V, a Frenchman placed in Avignon, far from the old seat of Rome. Clement was cautious, politically entangled, and, most of all, under the shadow of Philip's influence. The King of France had already bullied the papacy before, even moving it into French territory. Now Philip would pressure Clement to turn his gaze upon the Templars. At first Clement resisted. The Templars had been the Church's loyal servants for centuries. They had shed blood for Jerusalem, built churches across Europe, guarded the faithful on pilgrimages. To accuse them of heresy seemed unthinkable. But Philip was relentless. He presented accusations, testimonies, confessions obtained through whispers and threats. He played on fear, reminding Clement of the growing suspicion across Europe. If the Pope defended heretics, would not his own authority crumble? Finally, Clement wavered. He agreed to investigate, and in that hesitation the trap was sprung. On Friday, October 13, 1307, the blow fell. At dawn, across France, Philip's men struck simultaneously. Templar houses were raided, knights were seized, and Grand Master Jacques de Molay himself was dragged from his chambers in Paris. Thousands of Templars found themselves in chains, accused of crimes they scarcely understood. The day would live in infamy, echoing through history as the origin of the superstition that Friday the 13th is cursed. Under torture, the knights confessed to anything their captors demanded. Some admitted to denying Christ, others to worshipping idols, still others to obscene rituals no penitent could dare repeat. But these confessions, wrung from broken bodies and shattered wills, were as fragile as the men themselves. Yet Philip had what he needed. The charges were written, the evidence secured, the spectacle prepared. The once mighty Templars were paraded as heretics, traitors not to the crown but to God himself. The Pope, caught between loyalty to the order and the might of the French king, struggled. He attempted to assert control, calling for trials under church authority. But by then the tide had turned. The whispers had become roars. Across Europe, rulers followed Philip's example, arresting Templars, seizing their lands, feeding the fire of suspicion. The order that had once crossed borders freely now found those borders closing like iron gates. Their brothers were dragged to dungeons, their fortresses dismantled, their coffers emptied. And yet, amidst the destruction, one question lingered. What had Philip truly feared? Was it only their wealth, their power? Or was it the secret they carried, some hidden truth that, if revealed, could have shaken the church itself? For among the treasures Philip seized, something was missing. Rumour spread that the Templars had spirited away their greatest possessions, gold, relics, perhaps even the Holy Grail, before the king's soldiers arrived. Some claimed a fleet of Templar ships vanished from the French coast, sailing into legend with a treasure that has never been found. Whether truth or myth, the disappearance only deepened the aura of mystery. The Templars might be broken, but their secret, whatever it was, remained beyond the king's grasp. For Philip, however, truth was not the goal. Control was. By condemning the Templars, he secured their wealth, their lands, and their humiliation. And by forcing the Pope into compliance, he proved that no power, not even the Church, could resist the will of the French crown. The Templars, once the sword and shield of Christendom, were now prisoners, branded heretics, their fate sealed not by enemies on the battlefield, but by betrayal within the very faith they had served. Their trials would drag on for years. Their brothers would be tortured, their order dissolved. Their Grand Master would one day face the flames. But in their fall, a mystery was born that endures to this day. Because if the Templars were truly guilty, where was the evidence? And if they were innocent, why had the Church, guardian of truth, joined hands with the king's lies? The truth, like the Templar treasure itself, slipped into shadow, and in that shadow the legend of the Templars grew stronger than ever. The dawn raids of Friday the 13th, 1307, had shattered the Templars' world, but their true ordeal had only begun. For the knights who had once ridden with banners unfurled now found themselves chained in dungeons, their fates no longer in the hands of God or sword, but in the merciless grip of politics, lies, and fire. King Philip's accusations were sweeping: blasphemy, heresy, idolatry, corruption. To the public, it was unthinkable. How could the defenders of Jerusalem, the protectors of pilgrims, the servants of Christ himself, be guilty of such crimes? But Philip knew how to bend truth into a weapon. And in the medieval world, nothing destroyed a man more completely than the charge of heresy. The arrested Templars were dragged before inquisitors. The halls of judgment became chambers of torment. Chains, racks, and fire replaced scripture and reason. At first, many knights resisted. They declared their innocence, swore their loyalty to Christ, refused to confess. But the methods of the inquisitors were not meant to seek truth. They were designed to break flesh and spirit alike. Under torture, bodies bent and voices cracked. Some knights admitted to denying Christ. Others claimed they had spat upon the cross during secret rituals. Still others confessed to worshipping a mysterious idol, a bearded head, a demon, a relic. But were these confessions truth, or the cries of men who would say anything to stop the agony? The inquisitors wrote down every word, every forced admission, and passed them as proof of guilt. For Philip it was enough. The legend of the Templars as heretics began to spread, yet not all broke. Some knights, even under torture, held to silence. Others recanted their confessions once the pain subsided, declaring they had lied under duress. These, however, faced even worse punishment, for to admit a false confession to challenge the authority of the church and crown. Among those imprisoned was the Grand Master himself, Jacques de Molay. An old man by this time, de Molay had served the order for decades. He had led them through victories and defeats, through the loss of the Holy Land, through the mounting suspicion of Europe. Now, he faced humiliation beyond imagining. At first, under pressure, de Molay confessed, murmuring words of guilt to appease his captors. See, later, when given a chance to speak publicly, he recanted. He declared the Templars innocent. He called his confession a lie forced by torture. And in that moment he sealed his fate. Years dragged on. The trials twisted through politics and papal decrees. Pope Clement V formally dissolved the order in 1312, bowing to Philip's will. The Templars were stripped of their lands, their wealth seized, their brothers scattered or imprisoned. But the final act came in 1314. Jacques de Molay, along with several other leaders of the order, was brought to Paris to face judgment one last time. Before the gathered crowd, they were expected to confirm their guilt and accept their punishment. Instead, de Molay stunned the world. He stood tall as a man broken by years of chains could stand, and proclaimed the truth. The Templars were innocent. Their order had been faithful, their vows pure, their service holy. He declared before God and man that they had been betrayed, condemned not by sin, but by the greed of a king and the weakness of a pope. The crowd erupted. The judges, furious at his defiance, condemned him on the spot. And so it was that Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar, was led to the stake. On an island in the river Seine, in the shadow of Notre Dame, the pyre was prepared. The flames were lit. As the fire rose, Molay's voice carried above the crackling wood. He prayed, he proclaimed the order's innocence once more. And then, according to legend, he cast down a curse. He summoned King Philip and Pope Clement to appear before God's judgment within the year. And whether by coincidence or fate, the curse seemed to fall swiftly. Within months, both Clement and Philip were dead. The Pope of illness, the king from a stroke after a hunting accident. Their deaths fed the legend that the last Grand Master's words had been no mere outcry, but a prophecy fulfilled in fire. The Templars were gone, their lands seized, their order dissolved, their brothers scattered to monasteries, prisons, or execution. But their story, now wrapped in martyrdom and mystery, was far from over. Because though the Templars had been destroyed, their secrets had not been uncovered. the supposed idol, the hidden treasure, the knowledge unearthed beneath Solomon's temple. None of it was found. Philip had gained wealth and power, but not the heart of the Templar mystery. That, it seemed, had slipped beyond his grasp, carried into legend, guarded still by silence and shadow. And so the fires of Paris, meant to erase the Templars from history, only carved them deeper into memory. The image of Jacques de Molay, burning yet defiant, became a symbol, a reminder that truth, even when buried, does not die so easily. For if the Templars were guilty, why did their leader choose fire rather than falsehood? And if they were innocent, what secret had been worth dying for? The answers, like the treasure of the order itself, vanished into the darkness, but the curse of the Grand Master lingered, whispered across centuries, a warning to kings and popes alike, that even the mightiest fall, and that fire cannot consume truth forever. When the smoke of Jacques de Molay's pyre drifted over Paris, the world believed the Templars were finished. Their order dissolved, their leaders executed, their lands seized by kings and rival orders. The once mighty poor fellow soldiers of Christ were reduced to ashes and silence. And yet one question refused to die. What became of the Templars' treasure? For centuries their wealth had been legendary. Vast estates, ships, relics, and gold flowing through their vaults like rivers of power. King Philip, greedy beyond measure, expected to seize it all when he struck on that October morning. But when his men broke into Templar strongholds, they found little. Gold vanished, secret relics gone. Even the supposed idol of Baphomet never found. It was as if the order had known what was coming and spirited everything away into shadow. The most tantalizing mystery was the fleet. The Templars maintained a small but powerful navy, anchored at the port of La Rochelle on the western coast of France. Yet when Philip's soldiers arrived, the ships were gone, vanished without a trace. Where did they go? Some say they sailed north, carrying treasure and secrets to Scotland, where Robert the Bruce, excommunicated by the Pope and at war with England, may have sheltered them. Others claim they crossed the sea to Portugal, where King Dinis welcomed them under a new name, the Order of Christ. In later centuries, this very order would sponsor explorers like Vasco da Gama and Henry the Navigator, men whose voyages reshaped the world. Was the age of exploration fueled at its root by Templar knowledge? And still others whisper of voyages even farther, that the Templar fleet carried them west across the Atlantic to lands unknown in Europe at the time, perhaps even to the shores of America long before Columbus. If true, it would explain why Templar symbols later appeared in places they seemingly should not be. But the most enduring legend is that the Templars carried with them not just gold, but something far more precious, the Holy Grail itself. For centuries, stories of the Grail, the cup used by Christ at the Last Supper, said to hold miraculous power, had grown across Europe. In some tales, it granted eternal life. In others, divine wisdom. And in the shadow of the Templars' fall, whispers linked them to this sacred relic. Had they found it beneath the Temple of Solomon, hidden for centuries in secret vaults? Had they protected it in their castles, passing it from brother to brother in endless silence? When their order crumbled, had they carried it away into hiding, ensuring it would never fall into the hands of greedy kings or corrupt popes? No one could say. But the mystery only grew, and as time passed, the Templars did not vanish from memory. On the contrary, their story became woven into the fabric of myth and legend. In Scotland, tales spread that Templar knights fought alongside Robert the Bruce at the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, the very year of de Molay's death. Their sudden appearance on the battlefield, according to legend, turned the tide against the English. Whether true or not, the story endured, binding Templar mystique to Scotland's destiny. In Portugal, as we have seen, they became the Order of Christ, quietly preserving their traditions, their symbols, and perhaps even their secrets. The Red Cross of the Templars appeared once more on the sails of Portuguese caravels as they explored the globe. See, but perhaps the most mysterious transformation came centuries later, in the rise of the Freemasons. By the 17th and 18th centuries, Freemasonry had spread across Europe and beyond, an order of secretive rituals, oaths, and symbols, and woven into its mythology was the idea that the Freemasons were the heirs of the Templars. Their ceremonies, their hidden knowledge, their reverence for Solomon's temple, all echoed the lost brotherhood of warrior monks. Was this merely coincidence, a borrowing of myth to grant the Masons legitimacy, or was there truth? That surviving Templars, scattered and broken, had passed their secrets into new vessels, preserving their hidden wisdom for future generations. To this day, some Masonic rites still honor the Templar name, invoking their legacy as guardians of hidden truth. But what was that truth? Some believe it was the bloodline of Christ himself, that the Templars had uncovered documents or relics proving that Jesus had descendants, a revelation that could shatter the authority of the Church. Others suggest they carried forbidden knowledge of sacred geometry, alchemy, or the mysteries of creation itself. Still others cling to the Grail, the Ark, or lost Gospels hidden from the faithful. Whatever the reality, one fact is certain: the destruction of the Templars only deepened the allure of their mystery. For what is forbidden becomes irresistible. What is destroyed becomes eternal in legend. And so the Templars live on, in stories, in symbols, in the imagination of dreamers and seekers across the centuries. Their red cross still adorns castles, churches, and secret societies. Their name still inspires novels, films, and quests for hidden treasure. Their supposed secrets still haunt historians and mystics alike. Perhaps this is the true treasure of the Templars. Not gold, not relics, but a story so powerful it could never be silenced. A story that outlived kings and popes, that survived fire and torture, that crossed oceans and centuries, a story that whispers still that somewhere in shadow the Templars' greatest secret remains. And if that secret were ever revealed, what truth would it speak? The world was not finished with the Templars, and the Templars, it seems, were not finished with the world. Centuries have passed since the flames consumed Jacques de Molay on the banks of the Seine. Kings have risen and fallen. Empires have grown and crumbled. The Crusades are long gone, and the voices that once accused the Templars have long been silenced. And yet the Templars themselves are not silent. Their story still whispers in cathedrals and castles, in legends and secret societies, in symbols carved into stone and etched into memory. But behind the myths and mysteries, one question remains, echoing across time like a bell that will not stop ringing. What was the final secret the Church tried to erase? Was it gold? Surely not. For gold may buy power, but it does not inspire centuries of rumour and fear. Was it the Holy Grail? Perhaps, but the Grail, whatever it truly was, is more than a cup. It is a symbol of divine truth, of the bridge between the human and the eternal. Some believe the Templars uncovered a truth buried deep beneath the Temple of Solomon, scrolls or relics that revealed Christianity's most explosive secret, that the story told by the Church was incomplete, that Christ left behind a bloodline or teachings never shared, or a wisdom that threatened the foundations of papal power. If such a discovery were real, it would explain much. Why the order rose so quickly from poverty to power, why their loyalty seemed to belong not entirely to Rome, but to something older, deeper hidden, why kings and popes alike feared them, and why, when the time came, they were not merely disbanded, but utterly destroyed. The Church could tolerate wealthy orders, rival powers, even ambitious kings. But it could not tolerate a truth that undermined its very authority. And so the Templars had to be erased, not for heresy, not for blasphemy, but for the possibility that they carried a revelation too dangerous to see daylight. But here lies the irony. In destroying the Templars, the Church ensured their secret would live forever, because the unknown cannot be burned. The silence of the Templars became louder than any confession. Their secrecy became their legacy, and the mystery of what they carried, gold, relic, or forbidden knowledge, became the spark that would ignite centuries of legend. Even today, their shadow stretches across the world. Freemasons invoke their memory. Historians debate their fate. Treasure hunters scour mountains and cathedrals, caves and coastlines, searching for something lost. Writers and dreamers reimagine them in tales of grails, codes, and hidden bloodlines. Perhaps the Templars' greatest treasure was never material at all. Perhaps it was the story itself, the enduring flame of mystery, the unquenchable thirst for truth, a gift that forces every generation to ask questions, to doubt, to wonder what lies behind the official history, and maybe that was the Templars' true mission all along. Not merely to fight battles or guard pilgrims, but to carry a secret so profound that it could awaken curiosity for centuries to come. Jacques de Molay's curse lingers not just in the deaths of a king and a pope, but in the survival of his order's memory. His words, defiant in fire, ensured that the Templars could never truly be erased, for though their castles are ruins, though their swords are rust, though their order is gone, the mystery remains, and in that mystery lies their immortality. So what was the final secret the Church tried to erase? Maybe it was the Grail, maybe it was the Ark, maybe it was a hidden gospel, or maybe it was something simpler, yet more dangerous, the knowledge that no institution, not even the greatest, not even the holiest, can silence truth forever. The Templars stood between worlds, between monk and warrior, between church and crown, between faith and heresy, and perhaps their greatest secret was that the line between truth and legend is not as clear as we believe. For truth, like treasure, can be hidden, it can be buried, it can be silenced, but it cannot be destroyed. And so the Templars remain eternal in silence, unbroken in memory, their red cross still gleaming against the darkness of history. Their order is gone, but their secret still waits, and maybe one day it will be revealed